Good morning. It's a beautiful morning as it's looking like maybe a little bit of rain today as the day goes on, but the flags are again perfectly still this morning as they have been many days this week, and they just kind of remind us how the day starts. We start and everything seems calm, and then we'll see how the day goes. But the promise is that God is constantly in it with us through all of it, no matter what blows. His presence is a wonderful thing. This morning, as I'm bringing you this fireside chat, I wanted to um, continue to think about the law and the gospel a bit, and why that is important, and why that's so necessary for us to hear and to use the law and the gospel properly. Again, they're God's two tools, God's two words that He uses to call us and to bring us to Him. Last week we used a reference of wood needing to be split, and that the maul was like the law that made that initial cut and started to split us open, and the gospel was what drove that message home that would open us up and make us usable for Him. Well, this week, as I put all this together, and I had been thinking of a conversation with some of the people at a pre-Bible study Thursday that and it's a kind of a seemingly graphic reference, so please bear with me. But I asked the ladies, I said, have you ever seen anybody who's got a lot of earwax just in their ears, a lot of wax even flowing out of their ears? And they all made this really like disgusted look on their face, like, ugh. Because it really is disgusting, isn't it? If you think about it, just on the nature, not judgment of anybody or anything, but just to say, oh, that's really nasty. I said, well, that earwax, that's our sin. And if we actually had an understanding of our sin in that way, perhaps things would be very different. Because the fact is that our sin is disgusting to God. Our sin is what keeps us away from God. Our sin is what holds us away from God. And when He looks at us in our human nature, He looks and it's disgust because of our sin. And there's no one whose ears don't produce wax. There is no one, you see, who doesn't have an earwax problem. And I said, so if you understand it this way, that the law is the thing that comes to unstop your ears, to clean your ear out. Because if you ever had a heavy earwax problem, and I tend to have or have always had a heavily producing ears. At one point, I lost my hearing when I was younger. I literally couldn't hear, and I remember for about a week wondering what the heck happened. I mean, everything was muffled. I couldn't hear people. I had to yell to talk to people because I couldn't even hear what I was saying. And the law is that thing that comes in, unstops our ears. It blows that stuff of our life out of the way, and it opens the possibility for the gospel to get through. And but it has to start with understanding that our earwax is our sin is disgusting. If we look at it just like, oh, it's no big deal, then we're just not going to let anything affect us because we're just going to go on. When I came to the point where I couldn't hear anymore at all, and I remember I was pretty sure I was a junior or senior in high school. My mom sent me into the doctor's office, and he said, well, you've got excessive earwax problems. And he grabbed a syringe. It was a big syringe, like you would kind of see like if they were giving an animal a shot. And he filled it with warm water and some fluids, and he stuck it in my ear. And I remember the sensation of this syringe blowing this warm medicated water into my ear. And it was weird, and it hurt. It felt odd because it almost was warm and tickled, and at the same time it was painful because it was dislodging things in my ears. And I could hear the sound of this thing grinding at me. I could hear this water flowing through my ear, trying to clear it out. And then suddenly, it was gone. It cleared out. He blew all of that earwax out, and there was a big, for lack of a better term, there was a big plug of earwax. It was amazing the amount of stuff I'm looking at in this dish that he's holding to show me what had happened. That's how the law works. The law works to clear out our ears, to make us able to hear the gospel. But it does so by helping us to realize we're in desperate need of hearing God because we can't. We're missing. So many people are hearing the gospel in such a minimal little way, such a distant way. We've come to buy on to all kinds of reasons and why we don't need to come to worship, why we don't need to participate in a life of faith, why we can give ourselves excuses to do all kinds of things because our ears are plugged. And the world around us is helping us to keep that system plugged. Our ears that God made so that we could hear his word. Faith comes by hearing, the scripture says. But if you can't hear, how can God reach you? How can God get through to you and to me? And so that wonderfully weird feeling of having that water rush through my ears was like the law. I'm stopping my ears so that the gospel could be heard. And the gospel is, the true message of the gospel is, and again, you can't dismiss the one for the other, is that because of Jesus Christ, when God looks at you, though you are laden with sin, he sees you through Christ's eyes. He sees you as redeemed, and he sees you as righteous, and he sees you as holy, and he sees you all because of Christ's work for you and for me. And Jesus wants to unstop our ears so that we change in our own ways. Our life moves and changes, and we hear his word more and more. As we hear his word, we want to follow more and more. We grow closer to him all the time. And that's the beauty of a life of faith that continues to grow in this process of being cleansed and being able to hear and being drawn and leaving behind things that are plugging our ears. It's a really kind of sick example, but yet it's a very powerful one. And Isaiah 35 is a great place to go look about this. Isaiah 35 tells us that that the Lord is coming. And when we read things only from the law perspective, it sounds judgmental. It sounds very harsh on one hand, that the Lord is coming and he's coming with a vengeance. He's coming, and we realize in our heart, well, I know I'm a sinner. And so what we hear is this damaging word that he's going to come and destroy me. And that's not the word at all. When you read Isaiah 35, it says that the ears of people will be unstopped, that the limbs of people will be strengthened, they can walk, that all the promises of what Jesus does when he comes into a life will make them run and dance and walk a different path forever. But the people who can't hear, the wicked, as it is described in Isaiah 35, they're not going to walk that path because of their own ears hearing differently and going a different way. I mean, it was phenomenal when this stuff was removed from my ears. I'm sitting in an enclosed room inside of a building with windows that are closed up. It's not like you can open them. They were sealed windows. And suddenly I realized I could hear the birds outside through the window. I got in my car and to go home and about blew myself out of the car because I had the radio on, thinking it was very low or at a regular tone, but to hear it, I had cranked up the noise. It about blew me out of my car. If we let God come and blow the stuff out of our ears, we realize the need to go to Dr. Jesus, to have him help cleanse our ears and unstop them with the word of the law. Man, what could we hear? What could we realize? What could we participate in? What could we do? Which is far more than just the simple things and enjoyments of life, but a life that leads to joy and celebration because it has served the Lord and heard his voice clearly. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope it doesn't rain too much today, but I hope you have a great day in anyways as it goes. No matter how the flags are starting to pick up a little bit and blow, remember that the Lord is with you always and continually is there for you as well. God bless.